Now we are live.
Good afternoon, everyone. I, Dr. Ankur Lat, Scientific Manager Horiba, welcome you again to our webinar series, Count Beyond Cells. Hope you enjoyed our last webinar on platelets, which had a tremendous response, and thank you for that. The onset of monsoon is no doubt a time of relief from scorching summer heat as temperature drops and the landscape turns green and vibrant. However, the monsoon months infamously brings with them a number of infections such as dengue, malaria, typhoid, babesiosis, etc. And in this series, we are dealing with the parameters which get deranged during monsoon pertaining to diseases. Something we saw in the previous webinar, how platelet count changes. Similarly, today our focus is on erythrocytes. RBC can be targets of infections directly or indirectly. When the microorganism enters the RBC directly, RBC damage becomes a fundamental aspect of the disease process. Malaria is the best example of an organism that directly targets the RBC. But there are others too. RBC can also be indirect targets of infectious agents, and this can occur when molecules are bound to the surface of RBC, leading to immunological clearance, or when microorganisms produce toxin damage to the RBC membrane, leading to hemolysis, or when microorganism suppression of erythropoiesis occurs due to specific binding to RBC precursors. There are many mechanisms involved. Surprisingly, RBC can also guide us to diagnosis for infectious diseases. So today, we have a presentation here with us which deals with the changes in morphology and count of RBC parameters, and many a times leading us to the diagnosis. And of course, new age analyzers have a lot to offer, like FLACS for malaria, dengue, and MIC and MAC, that is microcytic and macrocytic RBC, are giving hematology a whole new magnitude. And there's a lot to explore on analyzers. So today's topic is going to be an interesting one. And also get ready for the thrilling question and answer session after the presentation. Meanwhile, you can type your queries in the chat box. So now, let me have the pleasure to call upon Dr. C.N. Srinivas. Professor Dr. C.N. Srinivas, he is MD Pathology. He has done diploma from National Boards, FCAP, PG DHRM, then EMBA, and MLE from prestigious Harvard University. He has done fellowship in immunodiagnostics and molecular pathology from USA. He is founder and managing director, consultant laboratory medicine, pathology and transplant immunology of Pragya Academy, Chennai. He has got many papers and publications to his name. So it's our privilege to have you here. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Ankur. At the outset, I would like to thank all the delegates who have been participating during this time of the day, as well as during this monsoon seasons, wherever they are coming from. Of course, Chennai is reeling at a temperatures of about 38 degrees, but I think the Maharashtra and the Karnataka and also the West is having a very heavy rainfalls, and a lot of roads have been blocked. So greetings from Chennai, and also greetings from Prayoga Academy for advanced learning. And we'll be dealing about what happens to the RBC, or what is the story of the RBCs during the monsoon. Do they have any clue for us to pick up the diagnosis and help in the patient care management itself? For the rest of the 30 minutes, we will just see how the secret lives of the red blood cells have been unraveled by the hematology analysis, as well as how we can proceed ahead for giving the healthcare management to our patients. So the objectives of the talk, as Dr. Ankur was just mentioning, we'll be just knowing about what are the role of the RBCs, whether they are having a direct targets or indirect targets for the infections during the monsoon season. What is the utility of the complete blood count and its utility, and some cases in between to understand the utilizing capability of the hematology analyzer. We all know that during the monsoon, there are various problems one can encounter. One is during the monsoon, you might have physical hindrances, but soon after the monsoon, we are having, most importantly, the mosquito breeding season will start because of the stagnant water. And there are high incidences of malaria and dengue. In addition, we might have got chikungunya also. We also have fecal-oral route transmission of the diseases, especially for the typhoid, the leptospirosis, as well as some of the other infections pertaining to the anaerobic bacteria also. So we have got diseases starting from the bacterial origin to that of the viral origin, to that of the fungal origin, to that of the parasitic origin too. Now, do these have any impact on the red blood cells? Do they have any quantitative or qualitative impact on the RBC count? Do they give any information about the macrocytic or the microcytic appearances of the RBCs? Or a peripheral blood smear may be revealing something else? Or do we have any advantages of the advanced hematological analysis to give us a flag for a dengue or a parasite, which also includes a parasitic index, will be the theme of this webinar itself. So we have first to understand a prologue case. Here we have a 34-year-old male who are admitted with the history of the jaundice, and his CBC, LFT and microbiological test was ordered. But let us now concentrate only about the CBC. What was the CBC here? So concentrate on the circled parameters here. You see that the hemoglobin is 11.1, hematocrit is about 18.2, the MCV is around 85, MCH is around 51.9, and MCHG around 61. So we understand that these are also being flagged up by the asterisks from the hematological analyzer. But the histogram shows a sharp peak, understanding that it is giving you something. But there are the flags which are come up here, which says that the patient may be having some RBC agglutination also. So let us see what happens in the smear. In the smear, we see a lot of agglutination. This is also called as polyagglutination because of the presence of the IgM antibodies. Now let us further evaluate the peripheral smear. The peripheral smear shows beautiful Plasmodium species here. So imagine if this analyzer, whatever would have been given an information to the user that this patient is probably having a malarial infestation in the beginning itself. How easy would it have been for the technologist to immediately respond to the call and tell as a critical alert to that of the physician wherever he is practicing that these machines are showing a flag off for the Plasmodium. So let us see how the machines are helpful. Before that, we will also come to this. So the RBCs may have a quantitative defect or a qualitative defect, which we were talking about. So when there is a quantitative defect, you might have anemia. It may be a dimorphic anemia, microcytic anemia, macrocytic anemia, or predominantly it may be a hemolytic anemia, or it may also be a polycythemia in cases of dehydration because of diarrhea or dysentery problem because of any of the viruses, or it may be even because of the dengue sometimes where you can have polycythemia also. We also have WBC disorders like leukocytopenia and leukocytosis. Platelets shows thrombocytopenia, thrombocytosis. You might have 2-cell lineage suppression or a 3-cell lineage suppression, as Dr. Ankur was saying you. So we might have any of these quantitative disorders which have been flagged off by the hematology analyzers. But I would like to take you only to this part today because the session is only on the RBC. On the peripheral smear, we might have to look for the red cell inclusions, typically for that of the malarial parasite. It might also have anisopoikilocytosis when you have got a lot of dimorphic anemia or you have got hemolytic anemia with cystiocytes. And remember that whenever we see cystiocytes, you have to do the percentage calculation. You have to say to that of the clinician in a report that what is the percentage of the cystiocytes you see, because percentage of the cystiocytes also is important for the physician to understand that this patient is critical or not. We usually consider the cystiocytes of more than 3% to be critical to be informed to that of the clinicians itself. Presence of toxic granules, fat vacuoles, Dole bodies in the WBCs are also significant, which indicate that the patient is having infection. Giant platelets indicate the recovery, especially when you have dengue fever or chikungunya, when you have thrombocytopenia, the percentage of the giant platelets and the percentage of the mean platelet volume, the percentage of the immature platelet fraction becomes very critical. So the secret lives of the RBCs are hit by two factors. One, by the direct invasion of the parasites to that of the RBC itself, or the indirect way by various means, which we are going to discuss further. Now here in this tabular column, as I told you, here you have got RBCs as the primary targets of the infection in the upper part. The most important is the malaria itself. Next is the babiosis. Fortunately, we are not seeing in India. You also can have Bartonellosis and toxoplasmosis. Occasionally, you might find this in our population. All these are going to invade the RBCs and produce hemolysis. Now, if you see here, it has been written as a blood group. We'll come to that in a short while. What are the importances of the blood group for the malaria? Next, RBCs do act as a secondary targets of infection or indirect way of the impinge of the hemolytic anemias itself by four methods or four ways. One is alteration of the surface of the RBCs, which causes immunological clearances. Classical example being Salmonella infections, Mycoplasma pneumoniae, and Haemophilus influenza, in addition to other infectious agents. The second pathway may be enzymatic exposure of the previously cryptic antigens, producing cold agglutination or polyagglutination, which we might call it as, and we will deal it further down. The toxic damage because of the toxin produced by the infective agent may also cause accelerated destruction, as in the example of Clostridium perfringensis, and inhibition of the RBC production itself can happen because of the parvovirus or the EBV, and acquired RBC antigens due to infectious agents, which might also produce the hemolysis itself. So as you see, the indirect pathway of infections also are critically important to us, as important as that of the RBCs, which are the primary targets of the infection. Most of the time, when we are having the secondary targets of the infection, the picture of the hematology analyzer initially will be either a type of particular anemia, and it might be reflected as a microcytic or a macrocytic anemia, or it could be a dimorphic anemia too. Now, in addition to this, the other clinical chemistry parameters also becomes very important. And most importantly, the microbiological support is also very, very important here. So let us deal first with the malaria itself. I just got you a simple diagram of the life cycle of the malarial parasite. So you have a mosquito, female Anopheles mosquito, which is going to inoculate the parasite, gets through the bloodstream, enters into the liver. You have got the hepatocytic cycle over there. Then you have got the erythrocytic cycle over there. Then there is the invasion of the malarial parasites to that of the RBCs, and the RBCs get into the hemolysis, and we will have a cycle over there producing the inflammation, infection, which also causes the fever and increase of the C-reactive protein also. Now, when we go in detail, when we were talking about the role of the blood group antigens, we should understand that these merozytes, which you have been seeing in a blue color and is a pear shape, get entry into the RBCs by the ligands. What are the ligands? Ligands are some of the protein surface structures which helps in penetration or anchoring of any of the parasites or any of the other antigen antibodies also. So here, whenever you have got an infection by Plasmodium falciparum, the merozoites gain entry to the multiple glycoprotein ligands, which is on the cell surface, and the ligands usually interacting are A type, the B type, and the C type. Remember that these are not the blood groups we are talking across, but these are the glycoproteins, which are A, B, and C. When it comes to the Plasmodium vivax, the Duffy antigen receptor for the chemokines are the route by which the Plasmodium vivax gains an importance for adhesion. That becomes very, very important. So we should understand that the presence of the glycoprotein on the cell surface are important for the penetration of the merozoites of the Plasmodium species inside the RBCs, which helps us to invade the RBCs here itself. When they are invading into the RBCs, there are various changes which are brought about by this parasites itself. So now let us see what happens. If the merozoites are on the surface of the RBCs, they produce an immune complex, brings an alteration in the cytoskeleton of the RBCs, bringing about the altered membrane structures. There is a rosette formation and which brings in the clearance itself. So I'll show you one of the cases where you have got a rosette formation in the malaria shortly. So understand that the merozoites on the RBC surface can bring destruction of the RBCs by the immune complex formation or the altered membrane, which we'll be seeing it. And this altered membrane brings about stickiness of the RBCs, formation of the rosettes, stickiness of the RBCs to that of the endothelial cells, and brings in a microthrombosis and hemolysis happen. Now coming to that of the modification of the RBC surfaces because of the invasion. Because of the invasion of the merozoites, the glycoproteins on the surface of the red cells alter. Most importantly is the thrombosporidin. Intracellular adhesion molecules becomes more expressive. Vascular adhesion molecules also becomes more expressive. So when you look into the progression of the malaria, you should understand that the RBCs which are infected by the merozoites do have altered membrane structure, brings about changes in the cell surface of the cellular adhesion molecules, which brings in adhesion of the chlorospals of the hematids, either the RBCs or the WBCs or the platelets inside the blood vessel, brings in change of this red blood cells stickiness, and which sticks on to that of the vascular endothelium itself, which produces microthrombosis. Because of this, you have got all the complications of the malaria itself, including the renal failure and the brain failure itself. Now, when you have the irregular red cell surface, they look like this, which are snobby or knobby, whatever you call. There is deposition of the immunoglobulin and the complement on the RBCs, and the cell surface looks like this by the scanning electron microscopy, and this RBCs are compared for the normal bidiscoidal concave cells over here, and these are the altered cell surface which you see. So such knobs or such irregular membranes are identified as abnormal, and they are destroyed even by the spleen. So let us see what are the other roles of the RBC's blood group antigen in this. We should understand that the blood group has got a role because the malarial parasites uses the glycoproteins of the blood group antigens to penetrate inside the RBCs, and hence the A antigen is having more 3 times risk of hemolysis when compared to the O antigen presenters itself. So let us see in a case of ABO blood group, what does it help? The ABO group antigens helps in adhesion and hemolysis, which I had already told you. And through the adhesion of the DARP, that is the Duff binding ligands, and the adhesion of the parasite cells and adhesion of the endothelium, brings about the further damage to that of the RBCs. And the Duffy coat dark, or the attachment of the merozoites and the RBCs, becomes very important for the Plasmodium vivax. So for summary here, you should understand that for the malaria to produce hemolysis, there is the need for the blood group antigen. Invasion brings about the change in the surface of the RBCs, and you have got microthrombosis, and you have got the lysis of the RBCs itself. So during these stages, you might have a CBC counts which may be varying from that of normal RBC count, normal hemoglobins, or you might have a waved off MCHC or flagged off MCHC, and you might have dimorphic pictures because of the hemolysis also. Here in one of the analyses from the HORIBA, the advantage here by using the HORIBA analysis is that the machine is capable of giving you a flag. See, that's what I was telling you. Some of the hematology analysis is so useful to us in the day-to-day practice where it is able to give us, yes, the blood which has been analyzed shows the flags for the Vivax and the falciparum also. Let us go in detail to this. Now, whenever you have got these other histograms or the scatter plots from the analysis, which shows very clearly the signatures of the malaria. So this is the trophocyte stage over here, which you see this as a clouding here. The zoonotic stage, which can be easily seen here, which is just above than that of the trophocyte stage. And when you have got a mixed stage, you will be having the total clouding on this area itself. So the extensive work of the research on the malaria is done by one of our leading leaders of the pathologist, Dr. Parag Garg, who is in Mumbai. And he has also published the article on the utility of the HORIBA machines, especially during the utility of in the malaria and the dengue itself. Thanks so much, Parag, for giving us this important information, which uses the adjunct of the hematology analysis in the current day practice. So correlation of these are also seen in the peripheral smears, which has been seen beautifully here. You have a ring structure, you have got the zoonotic stage, and again you have got rings on the zoonotic stage itself. So this is again a case of malaria by using the digital imaging where you have given various stages of the malaria itself in one of the cases. Now, as I was talking to you about the utility of the RBC histograms for that of understanding the microcytic percentage and the macrocytic percentage, the cell analysis from the HORIBA can also give you the percentage of the microcytes and the macrocytes, which can bring into the picture of analysis of the microcytic anemia or a macrocytic anemia in this. Now, you might be wondering that why all of a sudden when talking with that of the malaria, we have got into the microcytic and the macrocytic. You should understand that when you have got a case, when you are having a place where you have got a hemolytic anemia happening in that person, you will be having both microcytic population and macrocytic population. The macrocyte contribution may be basically because of that of the polychromatic cells too. So you have to use the reticulocyte channel also in your machine analysis to understand, or if your hematology machines are capable of giving reticulocyte for every peripheral smears you have used, or every EDTA samples which you are using, that's well and good. So in addition to the percentage of the microcytic and the macrocytic and the MCV value, we also get to know what is the reticulocyte count. If the reticulocyte count is high and the serum LDH is also high, it indicates that there is a hemolytic anemia in this person. So here, let us see in the machines which are by the HORIBA, let us see what are the parameters which is able to give us when we have got some enucleated RBCs or a dimorphic population. First, let us see the histograms because that's the very important part we usually neglect. The arrowgram here, which is the one, which is the RBC histogram, shows dual population here. There's a peak over here and you have got one. So these are called as a camel humps. And these camel humps are very important to pick up the dual population of the RBCs itself. So now let us see in this scatter plot of the RBC whether I'm able to get the dual population. Yes, you have got a dual population here. The major one is here on the upper hand, and you have got a lower hand, you've got a lower side here. Then you also have got the populations over here, which says that the patient is having a double population itself. Now, in the nucleated RBCs are here, which have been flagged off in the scheme 3 or the diagram 3 here. You have got the nucleated RBCs here. And it says very clearly that this person is having a dimorphic picture and you have got nucleated RBCs. Probably it may be a megaloblastic anemia itself. And the analyzer is also able to give you C-reactive protein here. So the C-reactive protein is around 69 milligram per liter. If you take the cutoff as around 5, and it indicates that the person is having an inflammation itself. So let us just think only one thing. Why do we get megaloblastic anemia in addition to that of the malaria or hemolytic anemias? It may be a parasite, especially in elderly people like this. It may be a parasitic anemia, which may be there, which may be giving us a clue that this patient may be harboring some parasites in his intestine, which requires some clearances by the antiparasitic drugs itself. Suppose this is an immunocompromised patient, as you have got 86-year elderly patient. One has to think even of what is called as the Diphyllobothrium latum infections, which may be very common soon after the monsoons itself. Now here one more case where you have got a microcytic anemia, and predominantly you see that there is a spike over here, and you also have got a lot of information from your research parameters here which says that there are presence of the giant platelets also. I know that these are smaller ones for you, but I can just only tell you that the gist of this preparation of this slide is to make you understand that whenever you have got microcytic anemia, you do have thrombocytosis, and you have to check for that of the platelet also. And in the platelet histogram here, you can see that you have got a lot of giant platelets here. So again, you have one more megaloblastic anemia here, which shows that the circle scatter plot shows you have got predominantly macrocytes over here. And the RBCs, which have been flagged off here, also shows that you have got a lot of megaloblastic anemia itself. I was talking to you about the polyagglutination. One of the cases of the COVID cases also may have polyagglutination, but I got this case to show you that such type of agglutinations are also common during the infections of the malaria, where it might be primarily because of the IgM, which produces a polyclonal gammopathy, especially when you have got a renal case itself. Now, that's about for the malaria itself. So in a malaria, we saw that the role of the blood group antigens are very important for the adhesion, invasion, and the hemolysis. Now, coming to that of the babiosis, which is again a parasitic infection, which is basically because of the bite of that of the ticks. And you have got two important species over here. You have got Babesiosis microti and divergens, and you should understand that these are again like malarial parasites or the protozoans, which has got the melanocytes which attach to the RBC surface by the glycoprotein A and the glycoprotein B. They invade by the presence of the vacuoles, that is the phagovacuoles, which causes this. And because of the phagovacuoles, the cytoskeleton, which is made up of actin and myosin, becomes very, very rigid. The cytoskeleton of the RBCs becomes very rigid, and this RBC cannot penetrate the capillaries. So they just get lysed. So you have got again hemolysis whenever you have got a babiosis. And how do they look? So these are looked as the Maltese cross appearances over here. I am thankful to the College of American Pathologists virtual slide programs, which gives us the proficiency testing on the malarial parasites and the hemoparasites. And one of two cases have been presented here. So these are the babiosis inside the RBCs itself. And you have got 4 of them, which looks like Maltese cross over here. And here also you have got. So you should understand that malaria and babiosis are commonly producing the invasion of the RBCs, and you have got hemolysis itself. Now coming to the Bartonella. Bartonella is usually transmitted by a bite of a sandfly, and the basic genus is about the Bartonella. The species is Bacilliformis. How do they produce? They again produce altered cytoskeleton, which brings in the destruction itself. So remember that the role of the glycoproteins and the phospholipid membrane is as important as the WBCs or that of the platelets, especially when compared to that of the RBCs also. So that's for the direct target. So in the direct, we saw malaria, babiosis, and Bartonellosis. And let us see how the RBCs are hit by the indirect targets. So I have just listed out whatever we have got. So the alteration of the RBCs can happen. You have got an polyagglutination because of the activation of the T system. We'll come to that. Toxic damage to that of the RBC. Production inhibition because of the parvovirus and the EBV. I'm not going to deal in much about the RBC production inhibition. Acquired RBC antigen due to the infection. I'll be just telling only one slide for you. So let us see what happens when there is an indirect target, when there is an infection by Haemophilus or Mycoplasma pneumoniae itself. Whenever you have got infection by the Mycoplasma or a Haemophilus influenza, there is presence of the IgM antibodies towards this bacteria. Now, when you have got IgM antibodies against this bacteria, they are going to attack the RBC I antigen presence on the surface of the red blood cells. They also act as a cross-reacting antibodies onto the RBC, producing hemoagglutination and hemolysis. Very simple. There's a cross-reacting antibodies of IgM type, which is going to adhere onto the cell surface of the RBCs. So RBCs are silent spectators. Okay, so they are only the silent spectators and they just get killed because of the cross reaction of the IgM antibodies producing the hemoagglutination and the hemolysis. Now, whenever there is an Haemophilus influenza infection, what happens? The Haemophilus influenza has got a capsular polysaccharide. The capsular polysaccharide adheres itself by way of the glycan proteins or ligands onto the surface of the RBC. The RBC cell surface becomes altered and it becomes the target for immune complex antibody reaction by way of complement activation and the cell death. So many things are happening whenever you are having an infection and the RBCs becomes the primary target or an indirect target for the cell death itself. Now coming to that of the cold agglutination or the polyagglutination, which is caused by virus, bacteria or septicemia. Now why I got here basically is that whenever you have got monsoon season, you have got upper respiratory tract infection and GI infection itself. It's okay when you are having an immunocompetent levels are better. But if you are having comorbid conditions, the respiratory infections will get on to the bacteremia and septicemia itself, which activates the T system in our blood. What is this T system itself? The T system is a very important antibody system which is there in our body. The T system produces anti-T antibodies from the age of 3 months in our body. So the blood is already having the T antibodies because of the GI bacterial colonies as well as infection exposure to that of the respiratory system as well as to the GI system itself. So we have got anti-T antibodies in this. The surface of the RBCs do have what is called as T antigen, which is rich in a protein amino acid called N-acetylneurominic acid. So the T antigen is on the surface of the RBCs, which is masked. So it is totally masked. So it is not being open to the environment itself because of the presence of the amino acid N-acetylneurominic acid. Now this N-acetylneurominic acid, because of the presence of the neuraminidase, okay, which is an enzyme released by the Clostridium perfringens, or it may be because of any bacteria of the viruses due to the respiratory or the GI bugs, is going to secrete a neuraminidase, and this neuraminidase is going to lyse the N-acetylneurominic acid. So what happens? The antibodies which are circulating in the blood is going to get adhered to that of the T antigen, producing an antigen-antibody reaction, and related to that, you get the complement-dependent cytotoxicity itself. So the complement-dependent cytotoxicity is going to kill this RBC, producing the hemolysis. So this is how the T system activation happens, and you might have adherence of that of the colleagues, that is the RBCs or that of the neutrophils, and you might have agglutination in the blood itself. So this is how you get onto the agglutination, and whenever you see next time the agglutination, think about the neuraminidase as an enzyme which may be infective, causing that of the exposure to that of the T antigen system itself. Now the last one to us is the toxic damage to the RBCs because of the toxins which are released by the Clostridium perfringens. So these Clostridium perfringens has got alpha toxins which are rich in lecithinase. This is going to act upon the lipoprotein of the RBCs, liberate the lysolecithins, and bring in the intramuscular hemolysis itself. So if you look, the entire RBCs during the monsoons infection, directly it is going to affect either producing the malaria or babesiosis or any other parasitic infection, or it is going to bring about the damage to the RBCs leading to that of the hemolysis itself. So the end product is going to be the hemolysis during the infection, direct or indirect. So the last part is the acquired RBC antigens which are leading to hemolysis. This is all very interesting as you go in depth and you study what is the role of the blood groups in that of the infections. It opens up a Pandora's box itself. Some of the microorganisms do has got deacetylanes, which is going to convert the blood group A and expose and convert them into blood group B. And when you have got anti-B, you have got blood group B exposure and you have got a hemolytic infections, which remember, it looks like that of a blood transfusion reactions itself. So during the investigation process of a hemolytic anemia, we should include Coombs test also as one of the secondary thoughts on investigation of the hemolytic anemia itself. So to conclude our talk, we should also understand that whenever I see such hemolytic episodic anemias or hemolytic microcytic macrocytic anemias, or you have got a flag off and a hematology analyzer, what should I do? First thing is that we do the smear study, pick up whether we have got parasites, ionosopoikilocytosis, presence of the cystiocytes, which I told you, presence of the nucleated RBCs, and look at the WBCs also. Added advantage, if your CBC analyzer has got flag off for Vivax, falciparum, and dengue, very good. You might have a bonus there. And if it also have a C-reactive protein like that of the Horiba systems, which will be able to give a flag off for Vivax, falciparum, as well as dengue and C-reactive protein, you can have 24 hours reporting system where you can tell to the clinician that the hematology analyzer has given a flag off for Vivax or falciparum. I'm sure that you will be having Sisons or that of the prophyzoids in these cases. Pending review, go ahead and treat the patient for that of the malaria because the C-reactive protein is also high. ESRs will also be high. The LFT and the LDH are very important in hemolytic anemia because they will be having altered enzymes, and increase in the LDH indicates that there's a hemolysis. Coombs test may be positive, especially the direct antiglobulin test will be positive. The urine analysis may show you hematuria. You might have dysmorphic RBCs or isomorphic RBCs, and the color of the urine may also be totally different. So whenever you have got falciparum malaria, one has to look for the color of the urine also. So in addition, I told you the support of the microbiology is also important, especially for the urine culture, the blood cultures, the sputum cultures, and the serology for the mycoplasma hemagglutination, EBV serology, and the toxoplasmosis itself. So these approaches are going to help us out to unravel the mystery of the RBCs, especially during the monsoon season itself. So to conclude and put a big thank you to you for your patient listening. Understand that next time when you're doing a CBC platform hematology analysis, ask yourself that whether this machine is capable of giving a flag for the parasitic forms. Does it give you parasitic index? Whether I'll be able to pick up the presence of the parasites by the histogram or the scatter plots of the WBCs or the RBCs. Am I able to get up a thrombocytopenia with IPF or that of the immunogranulocyte fraction, or it may be immunoplatelet fraction in that cases, or I'm able to get a dimorphic picture where I can do a peripheral smear and try to help the clinician itself. In addition, kindly look for the LDH, which is a very important parameter for the hemolysis, OTPT or the SGOT, SGPT from the liver enzymes, and do not forget to look for the hematuria in cases of any of the infections during the monsoon, because acute kidney injury can be prevented, it can be detected, and only the laboratory can support the physician in saving the patients itself. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Absolutely a wonderful session, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, cases were really good. And I'm sure you must have enjoyed, audience, as much as I did. It's rare that RBC is so much explored for the diagnosis. Today we saw all of that. And we also saw the emerging role of analyzers. One thing is for sure, a detailed CBC report gives much more information than our expectations. And I'm sure future is going to be analyzers with additional parameters like flags and micmac and many optical platelets, many new parameters which are emerging. So, and in the webinar, we found out that the main culprit is polyagglutination and hemolysis. So I think so it was a beautiful session. Thank you for that. And now let's move to the question and answer session. We already have few queries in our kitty. And like first is from Dr. Smruti. Dr. Smruti, any experience with Plasmodium knowledge infection diagnosis in Indian scenario?
Could you come again, Dr. Ankur?
Yes, sir. Any experience with the Plasmodium knowledge?
No, I don't have any experience in that.
Okay, okay. So I think it's prevalent in like Malaysia or some Middle East, as far as my knowledge. But in Indian scenario, we don't have cases on that.
Okay.
Okay, fine. So there was one slide pertaining to the SARS-CoV-2 structural change.
I'll show you that. Wait.
Yeah.
There was it. Yeah, here.
So what are the exact structural change on the RBC because of the SARS-CoV-2? And there is any morphological difference also?
Okay, now this I got to show you that there are presence of the satellitism of the RBCs on to that of the surface of that of the neutrophils itself. This was seen in about 3 to 4 cases on SARS-CoV-2 patients. And when I was digging up the literature, I found out that the RBCs too develop the IgM antibodies, which become sticky to that of the neutrophils itself. There is again the role of the ligands over here, which becomes very important to change the surface of the RBCs and the surface of the neutrophils itself. So there are 2 ways to look into it. One is the presence of the early IgM antibodies, especially for the SARS-CoV-2 infection, or it may be presence of co-infections by the Epstein-Barr virus or cytomegaloviruses also, especially when you are immunocompromised. So this is a case of chronic kidney disease on dialysis. He had a serum electrophoresis also done because we saw rosettes and we had to rule out the T neoplasms, T cell neoplasms. So we did the serum electrophoresis and there was hypergammaglobulinemia, predominantly IgM type, and it was not a monoclonal gammopathy because you had got increase in the C-reactive protein and ferritin also. So this only the subsurface change which brings in this satellitism of the RBCs around the neutrophils.
So, sir, you think we should be going for like peripheral smear on SARS-CoV-2 to exactly find out the morphology and also?
Yes, see, actually it is better that whenever you have got to known case of SARS-CoV-2, kindly do the smears, because we do see lot of varieties of RBC changes, especially like cold agglutinins, satellitism of the platelets around the neutrophils, satellitism of the WBCs. We are seeing satellitism of the RBCs around the neutrophils. All these do happen. And if you have got a qualitative assays for the SARS-CoV-2 immunoglobulins, you will immediately come to know that there are presence of total antiglobulins to be high, or particularly IgM to be high rather than the IgG itself.
Okay, sir. Very nice, sir. It means that SARS-CoV-2 can have varied presentations, like it may be in WBC, RBC, platelet, anything, sir.
Any change can happen in the SARS-CoV-2, and it's quite interesting that you can see the whole library of the inclusions of the WBCs, whole RBC changes when you are reviewing all your SARS-CoV-2 patients. We had very good library when we saw all this in the first wave of the SARS-CoV-2 infection itself.
Sir, have you come across any interesting case, morphological change, sir?
Yeah, we did get, see, actually even we had polyagglutination, which I showed you, and this is one more. but we have more towards the WBCs rather than the RBCs. See, the WBCs, we also saw a lot of blue-green crystals of death, which are being reported from past 2 years in the immune complex diseases, and Howell Jolly-like inclusion bodies in the WBCs, Dole bodies, which were rampant, and also we saw dysplastic RBCs and dysplastic WBCs in the peripheral smear because of the hemolysis.
Okay, great. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
So another question is, how common is babesiosis? Like, is it common in?
I think babesiosis, I have not seen it in India here. So about 26 years of being in the pathology and the laboratory medicine and in various institutions, I have not seen any of the babesiosis in India, nor there is any report in the literature.
Okay, sir. So where it is prevalent, like which part of the world is it prevalent?
Usually the babesiosis are common in the Mexican countries as well as that of the few migrants of the US population. And it has also been reported much so in the Libya. So these are the cases where we get babesiosis, and babesiosis are not much common in our Asian countries, which is what I have heard. But this digging of the literature did show that Asian countries reporting immigrants and the migrating tourists who come over there where they have got episodes of fever or hemolytic anemias, and they have found out that they have got this. But countries like Fiji has got increased episodes of this babesiosis itself because of the migrating population itself.
Okay, sir. And sir, are there any different morphological forms, or like just one presentation of on slide?
There is only one presentation of this, and sometimes there may be extracellular also. So extracellular also, you might see clusters of small ring-like structures which may be there, and most commonly it will be inside the intracellular. Extracellular presence can also be there. You are right, Ankur. You can see extracellular presentation of the babesiosis also.
Okay, perfectly fine, sir. Very good, sir. And sir, like you were talking about the variation on the in blood group. So
Yeah.
what changes can be there? So sir, can you explain that slide? There was one question regarding that.
Yeah, 1 minute. I'll just go to that. I think people should, I can do one thing, Ankur. I can send you the 2 good reference articles on this so that you can share to the participants and they can get the whole idea about how the importance of the RBC blood groups are important. So this is what I read from one of the articles from the ASH, which says that RBCs are the target of the infections. In that, they had given a shortened way of how this happens. So in the acquired RBC antigens, what happens is, okay, I'll just read out for the presence so that I don't miss out anything. They say that certain infective organisms do produce what is called as deacetylens. Now this deacetylens will act upon the blood group A, and we all know that the blood group A has got some biochemical composition which we are not going in depth because of the short of the time, where you have got deacetylization of one of the groups here. So when you have got the deacetylization of the blood group A, the blood group A changes into blood group B. So this is called as acquired RBC changes because of the presence of the deacetylens by the infective organisms. So these organisms, usually it may be Clostridium group, or it could be perfringens, Clostridium perfringens or Clostridium difficile, or it may be even because of the fungal infections which produces deacetylens, where there is change of the blood group A to blood group B itself. See, these are all the changes in the sugars which brings about the change in the morphology of their structures itself, where they get changed into the blood group A to blood group B. Some of the literature says that there is a change in the acetyl group of the blood group A, which changes to that of the blood group B, or there may be addition of the acetylization or the deacetylization, which may bring about the change itself. I'm not going in deep, but I can share you the 2 articles which gives you a in-depth analysis of the molecular basis of the blood group antigens for the infections itself, which you can share with everyone.
Oh, that's great. So it was very informative. So I was not aware of the fact myself.
Dr. Ankur, I have to thank actually the HORIPA scientific committee, including you and Prakash, for giving this tough topic. But this tough topic made me go in-depth analysis of the blood groups and why blood group glycan and glycoprotein or the ligands are very important for the invasion and for the surface alterations of these bugs. So I should thank you people for giving me and light to understand this. So I'll definitely share the two articles with you.
Sure, sir. The pleasure is ours. Like we are today having in-depth insight about RBC, which we never thought like.
Absolutely, absolutely.
And sir, there is one more question. Are there any blood group more susceptible to malarial infection?
A group is very, very susceptible to malaria.
Okay, okay. And sir, any specific mechanism for this?
I already told you that when you have A blood group, they have got more expression of the glycoprotein on the surface of the RBCs for the invasion of the Plasmodium species inside the RBCs. That is, the cell surface exposures will be having high for the group A rather than that of the group B.
Sir, thank you so much, sir. It was very informative. There were many new things which came out today, and we are really privileged to have you on our platform. But before ending this session, just let me again tell you something about HABX. I know it's a repetition, but when we talk about hematology, we have to talk about HABX. Hematology analyzer-based exchanges. It's a distinctive digital platform to enhance scientific knowledge in hematology. This was started a few years back and has grown with time to become more safe and easy to use. Here, healthcare professionals can learn about hematology, its parameters, clinical utilities, and recent advancements. This also provides unique opportunity to publish technical write-ups, scientific literatures, useful videos, and also help hematology researchers and students to conduct research studies on the subject. In addition, can get opportunity to interact with other hematologists and can seek out expert opinion if required. What more, you also get rewarded for the scientific work. Amongst the new features, the site contains integrated Android and iOS app links to foster improved accessibility to users. And we are constantly apprising our content with supportive information, articles, blogs, newsletters, webinars, and recent updates, and much more. And I can assure you, it's an interesting and informative platform. To learn more, join our website www.habx.in and get introduced to the endless possibilities in hematology. I think now with this we will end our webinar. Let me thank dear audience for their time and constant support. We will be sending you participation certificates too. And once again, thank you audience, and Srinivasa, thank you so much for this brilliant session.
Thank you, Dr. Ankur.
Yeah, so stay tuned for the next session. We'll be back again with the leukocytes and flags. And thank you once again. Stay home, stay safe, and namaste.
Namaste. Thank you.